Hello, everyone. My name is Paola Gutierrez. I live here in the United States in Chicago, Illinois. I'm 27 years old. I am learning languages in the uni. And we just finished the International Book Club. We were reading the book Educated by Tara Westover. And just wanted to share my favorite quote. It was the skill I was learning was the crucial one, the patience to read things I could not yet understand. And I think this is a perfect example of that because there are a lot of people that feel, a little bit afraid of learning new things or, learning new languages. And she's teaching us like to do these amazing things. Like you're gonna learn a lot of things. So I wanted to invite you guys to the International Book Club to our next meeting. So see you there and have fun.
The memory of Tyler haunted me that winter. I remembered the day he left, how strange it was to see his car bumping down the hill loaded with boxes. I couldn't imagine where he was now, but sometimes I wondered if perhaps school was less evil than Dad thought, because Tyler was the least evil person I knew, and he loved school, loved it more, it seemed, than he loved us. The seed of curiosity had been planted. It needed nothing more than time and boredom to grow. Sometimes, when I was stripping copper from a radiator or throwing the 500th chunk of steel into the bin, I'd find myself imagining the classrooms where Tyler was spending his days. My interest grew more acute with every deadening hour in the junkyard, until one day I had a bizarre thought that I should enroll in the public school. Mother had always said we could go to school if we wanted. We just had to ask Dad, she said. Then we could go. But I didn't ask. There was something in the hard line of my father's face, in the quiet sigh of supplication he made every morning before he began family prayer, that made me think my curiosity was an obscenity, an affront to all he'd sacrificed to raise me. I made some effort to keep up my schooling in the free time I had between scrapping and helping Mother make tinctures and blend oils. Mother had given up homeschooling by then, but still had a computer, and there were books in the basement. I found the science book with its colorful illustrations and the math book I remembered from years before. I even located a faded green book of history. But when I sat down to study, I nearly always fell asleep. The pages were glossy and soft, made softer by the hours I'd spent hauling scrap. When Dad saw me with one of those books, he'd try to get me away from them. Perhaps he was remembering Tyler. Perhaps he thought if he could just distract me for a few years, the danger would pass. So he made up jobs for me to do, whether they needed doing or not. One afternoon, after he'd caught me looking at the math book, he and I spent an hour hauling buckets of water across the field to his fruit trees, which wouldn't have been at all unusual, except it was during a rainstorm. But if Dad was trying to keep his children from being overly interested in school and books, from being seduced by the Illuminati like Tyler had been, he would have done better to turn his attention to Richard. Richard was also supposed to spend his afternoons making tinctures for Mother, but he almost never did. Instead, he'd disappear. I don't know if Mother knew where he went, but I did. In the afternoons, Richard could nearly always be found in the dark basement, wedged in the crawl space between the couch and the wall, an encyclopedia propped open in front of him. If Dad happened by, he'd turn the light off, muttering about wasted electricity. Then I'd find some excuse to go downstairs so I could turn it back on. If Dad came through again, a snarl would sound through the house, and Mother would have to sit through a lecture on leaving lights on in empty rooms. She never scolded me, which makes me wonder if she did know where Richard was. If I couldn't get back down to turn on the light, Richard would pull the book to his nose and read in the dark. He wanted to read that badly. He wanted to read the encyclopedia that badly. Tyler was gone. There was hardly a trace he'd ever lived in the house, except one. Every night after dinner, I would close the door to my room and pull Tyler's old boombox from under my bed. I dragged his desk into my room, and while the choir sang, I would settle into his chair and study, just as I'd seen him do on 1,000 nights. I didn't study history or math. I studied religion. I read the Book of Mormon twice. I read the New Testament, once quickly, then a second time more slowly, pausing to make notes, to cross-reference, and even to write short essays on doctrines like faith and sacrifice. No one read the essays. I wrote them for myself, the way I imagined Tyler had studied for himself and himself only. I worked through the Old Testament next. Then I read Dad's books, which were mostly compilations of the speeches, letters, and journals of the early Mormon prophets. Their language was of the 19th century, stiff, winding, but exact, and at first I understood nothing. But over time, my eyes and ears adjusted so that I began to feel at home with those fragments of my people's history, stories of pioneers, my ancestors, striking out across the American wilderness. While the stories were vivid, the lectures were abstract, treatises on obscure philosophical subjects, and it was to these abstractions that I devoted most of my study. In retrospect, I see that this was my education, the one that would matter. The hours I spent sitting at a borrowed desk struggling to parse narrow strands of Mormon doctrine in mimicry of a brother who'd deserted me. The skill I was learning was a crucial one, the patience to read things I could not yet understand.